social media, we were kind of all programmed with this really bad model of post and ditch, where you all you do is post, and ditch. You don't pay attention to what anybody else is saying or doing, whether they're liking.
Growth equals transactions, and that's true. But the route to transactions are often through relationships.
You have to track engagement as opposed to how many people join, because a lot of people, they join these communities, but then they never do anything.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. I'm Jeff Steck, and I'm here with my co-hosts Ken Tucker of Changescape Web in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And, Ken, ever since you moved there, I can't spell it, but I can say it. So Paul Barthel of Changescape Web in St. Charles, Missouri, or somewhere in that area. And Ian Kentel of Outsource Marketing in Bradford, Ontario, Canada, our resident Canuck. I made sure I was okay to say that before we started. So today we're going to tackle something that might make you a little bit uncomfortable. Not you, our guides, although maybe. We'll see how it goes. We're going to talk about the difference between having an audience and building a genuine community. I kind of alluded to this last week. It's a nice outgrowth of our last episode topic. But we want to talk about community and why the difference between building a community and building an audience could be key to growing your business without constantly throwing more money at ads. Now, here's a question that might sting a little. How many of your social media followers would actually recommend you to a friend? If you're like most businesses, you spent years building an audience that just passively scrolls by, part of their late night doom scrolling. They go past your content. They don't actively promote your business. So today we're going to dive into community building, not the buzzword version, but the real strategy of turning customers into advocates who create content for you. That's really powerful. Refer their friends. That's even more powerful. And stick around longer than any follower ever will. We're going to cover how to identify the customers who could become genuine community champions, where to actually build these relationships without getting trapped by platform changes, and what metrics actually matter when you're building something that lasts. One more paragraph in my intro. So if you've ever felt like you're shouting into the void on social media, or you're tired of chasing vanity metrics that don't translate into real business growth, this episode is for you. So Ken, you're in the top left corner of my screen, so let's start with you. What's the fundamental difference between having an audience and building a community, and why should small business owners care about making the shift?
Yeah, well, to provide a pretty simple answer to get started, audience, think of it as one-way communication. Typically passive, you're pushing content out to people who are your followers, or people who like you, or whatever your social media connection status may be called. Communication or community is really two-way conversation. So it's really trying to stimulate engagement. That's not just, and when a lot of people think engagement, they think, oh, cool, I got a like on this. But really, engagement is so much more important than just a like. Likes don't really do much for you. They're really vanity. They're not beneficial. You need to have active participation through comments, where people are actively having conversations and commenting on what you're posting. But ideally, even having conversations back and forth between other members who are posting on that particular piece of content, or within your community, as however you build it. Community members engage, and it's a much more organic thing. And the people who are feel like they're part of a community, they're going to stick around for a lot longer time. I think the average is probably 3 times higher lifetime value, and they're also going to be better referral sources for you. So it makes a lot of sense to invest in building community. I know it's a challenge because social media, we were kind of all programmed with this really bad model of post and ditch. Where you all you do is post, and ditch. You don't pay attention to what anybody else is saying or doing, whether they're liking. You might go on there and look and see, because you have pride in how many people may have liked a particular post and whatnot. But if you're not in getting them to have a conversation, that's a big mistake. I think one way to think about it is, how do you use social media personally versus as a business? As a business, we kind of fall into this trap, not everybody, but a lot of people, where we just basically push content out. It's all about getting what we want to say out there, not really thinking about what conversations do we really need to be having with the people that are engaging with us, that hire us to take care of problems or have questions to see if we're able to provide them with answers, whether they're ready to hire us or not, to see us as trusted sources. So I think, just keep in mind engagement is the key metric that you need to be looking at, not likes. That's what's going to move the needle. That's what's going to increase visibility. That's what's going to build loyalty and also help to facilitate referrals. A couple of simple examples. Think about a gym that has 5,000 Instagram followers. How would they compare versus 500 active members who are always sharing workout wins? Who do you think is going to be more engaged and committed to the business? I think the answer is pretty easy, but if you have any questions, it's the 500 active engaged members. Restaurants who email subscribers versus having a loyal base of customers creating what we call user-generated content, meaning they're going out of their way to take pictures and post those pictures about your business and maybe even tag the friends that they're there with. I could go on, but I think those are the key kind of concepts that you want to think about. So don't focus on follower count, focus on engagement. That's a common mistake that too many businesses make. Don't fall into this broadcast announcement all the time. I think the rule of thumb is you probably ought to broadcast maybe 20% of the time, and the rest should be trying to facilitate engagement, share value, add value that can lead to conversation, because that conversation is engagement. And then, don't be afraid if people start to take over the conversation and are having conversations among themselves. That I think that's actually a positive sign that you stimulated a conversation that needed to happen. Now, we'll get into this later. I mean, you need to moderate this and make sure things don't get out of control. But, you don't have to be the everything when it comes to building this community. I mean, ideally, you want to get participants. We call it community for a reason. It's not just you. It's other people, other businesses, or other people that are going to be contributing. So I think that pretty much covers, I think, the differences between audience versus community.
The one thing I would add to that, Ken, is I think we have a natural tendency, just because of the way social media works, right? And it's kind of this natural gathering of people that we automatically assume when we're talking community, we're talking about social media, but community goes much beyond that, right? It can be people on Facebook groups. It can't even be just, followers of your Facebook profile, but they're the active ones. It could be a Slack channel. It could be a Circle channel. It could be Reddit, right? There's lots of places now online, but community can take all sorts of different forms. Right. So I'm just raising that because I don't want our listeners to go, they're just talking social media today. But we're talking about kind of the broader idea of community.
Yeah, good point.
It can even be live events.
It can happen on your YouTube channel. It can happen on blog posts if you allow comments to be added to your blog posts. Obviously, you need to be careful with that because, unfortunately, spammers love to dominate comments on blog posts. So normally, we recommend turning those off and trying to take, the conversation and community building off to other platforms. Just because it's such a chronic problem. But yeah, no, the good point, Ian.
Yeah. And to your point, Jeff, just what you were about to say, I know an agency owner who lives in a rural area. And there's this kind of magnetic rodeo that happens in a valley near his home every year, and so his family has gotten into the habit of actually camping there, and then they've now invited their customers and clients and people in their sphere of influence to come and camp with them at this rodeo every year, and it's become this annual trek where people really value it because they're connecting with like-minded people, and there's all sorts of different forms this can take.
Yeah, there's here in Texas, football is big, of course, and tailgating is just as big. And businesses are sponsoring elaborate tailgating events, out in the parking lot or the designated tailgating area of home games. There's a lot of different forms that building community can take. And I think one of the keys in my mind is that it really represents an investment in your, clients, customers, target audience's mind, right? They're more engaged, but that more engagement means they're more invested in you as well, which is a great thing.
Yeah, if I could, one thing that I used to do, I sold solar for a little while, and one of the things that we used to do is have a barbecue every time we did a new solar install and invite the neighbors to come over, and it was a community building activity. Obviously, it was marketing because it gave us an opportunity to talk to the neighbors about the solar system that was installed as well. But, it was also an opportunity for the homeowner to kind of show off, to feel good about the investment that they made. It was just good to get neighbors together or friends that they invited from across the community to come hang out for a while. I think events are a big part of community, and they need to be done and planned accordingly.
I think another comment is that it works both ways, right? The business owners or, their employees, their staff, their customer-facing people for sure need to also be willing to invest the time and energy to engage. The engagement isn't just on the part of your clients and customers. And what made me think of that is, I'm a member of a Chamber of Commerce that's got some, fairly high-level members that never show up at any events. So they wrote a check because they could afford to get their name on things, but that's not really being part of the community. That's not really engaging.
It's called
Paul, anything you want to add before we move on, or?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Well, we'll get to you in a minute. I have a question for you coming up, but this next one, we'll go to Ian. So Ian, how do you structure your business operations around community rather than treating it as just another marketing add-on?
Yeah, this is pretty key, right? Like it takes intentionality, takes commitment, and it takes investment, and for any type of marketing strategy. But it takes strategy. It takes having the right people with the right systems, doing the right things consistently. I think this is why most businesses don't invest in community development as much, because it's hard. It takes work. It takes effort. It's very easy to broadcast messages, right? In fact, I think most of us who work with clients at small businesses, we know that even from a social media standpoint, even if we're helping them with social media, we can't be the ones doing all of the interaction with the community. They have to take that on. Like they have to respond to comments. They need to do that kind of stuff. There are strategies where agencies can do that, but it's harder because you're not in the business, right? And so I think a lot of businesses shirk that because they are so focused on, hey, we're just trying to get more business. This social media thing, using social media as an example again, because it's the lowest kind of hanging fruit. It's the easiest thing where you can try to do this, but it takes more work. But the payoff can be very, very large. So I mentioned strategy. That's where anything like this starts. You need to know, first of all, who is your community? Who are your ideal clients or customers that you want in this community? Because if you don't have that down, if you don't have what the goals are for your community, how can we turn this into a profit center for our business? Not just a marketing expense, right? Switching from a membership mentality from a transaction mentality, because a lot of us, who have businesses are very focused on growth equals transactions. And that's true. But the route to transactions are often through relationships. And so it can become very powerful. The other thing I would say too is part of your strategy. You need to understand that community can be part of your buyer's journey for prospects, and so and for clients, because they need to know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, and refer. And so this can fit this hourglass structure, this marketing hourglass or buyer's journey framework can be used even in your development of the community, how to draw people into it, how to move them through it, nurture them, and then ultimately how to capitalize on it to some degree for your business. So that's really important as well. And then the other thing, because the question is all about how do you structure your business operations around community? Part of your strategy has to be, how do we put the resources, the people, and the solutions in structurally in place into our business so that we can actually do this, so that we can deliver on community building. Because if nobody is responsible for it, it's never going to get done. And I'm not suggesting necessarily, and in fact, in most cases, you wouldn't want a full-time person in a role like this unless you can substantiate it from a cost center perspective. But somehow you need to distribute the workload across your team, or at least task different team members with that work in order for it to get done and those touch points to happen. And then, it's really about how do you create a community mindset in your business, and how do you execute on that community mindset? How do you create community? And so again, it takes strategy, it takes testing, it takes feedback, right? You're monitoring. It's about the relationships that you're building. And there's different models that can be done for this, where I think all of us have probably purchased some software, been a part of a software group. And a lot of times with software, there's community, right? There's Facebook groups that are, they're sectioned off only for users of a piece of software. And the reason the developers do that is because they know that you've got your own support group, right? They still have to provide support, but now you've created a support group that your users are actually helping each other, and community is starting to blossom. It also creates a feedback mechanism where your customers can complain to each other, but they can also encourage each other in what's going on. And of course, it takes on different shapes and styles depending on the type of business. But those are some of the big things I would certainly, look to getting in place in order to create a structure.
You hit on a lot of things in there. I think the notion of identifying, especially if you're thinking about starting a community, identifying advocates. Who are your seed members of your community? The ones that are really your ideal clients. If I were to go to any business and say, give me a list of your 6, top clients, the ideal clients you wish you had more of like that. That's an exercise we go through when we do strategy first, right? Those 6 people are probably good, people to approach to say, I'm thinking about starting a community. Would you like to be a core part of that? And maybe you offer them some kind of incentive or some kind of access to something. There's a lot of different things you could do. But that's, one notion that I think is worth bringing out. You don't just put it out there and say, hey, we have a community now. You need to think about, you use the word intentionality. You need to think about how you want to set it up, how you want to run it, who you can enlist. You talked about having somebody else in the business involved, and it's probably multiple people, but one person I think could have the lead on that. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time, like you said, but it needs to be one person that is the guiding force, because you don't want 10 people going 10 different directions.
You need those internal champions and the external champions, right?
Yeah. But a couple other things you hit on, the benefits of community and how you can bring that back into your business and your operations. We all work with a particular software vendor. I don't know if we're mentioning names, but they actually let their community upvote on how to prioritize features that they're considering adding. They're gathering feedback, so it's guiding the development and therefore directly the revenue growth of their company. And it's really cool how they're engaging their their users in their community to do that. So there's a lot of benefits. And also from a referrals point of view, we know word of mouth is a powerful referral mechanism. What better way to get that started than by educating your community and asking your community to help with that too. But I've been talking a lot on things that popped into my head. William was talking. Ken, Paul, anything you want to add?
No.
No, there's a lot covered there.
Too much, Paul?
Yeah.
That's why Paul's not on camera, because we don't want to watch his head explode. But yeah, there's a lot going on with community, a lot of potentials and a lot of different angles to it. And, people that aren't tapping into it are kind of missing the boat. Ready to move on to the next question then? Paul, you're up on this one.
All right.
Give you a second to collect your thoughts. You're ready to go here. How do you identify and activate the customers who could become genuine advocates and community leaders?
Yeah, first, I think it's important to understand that having community can be powerful because these are people, customers, they're not employees, and they're referring and advocating for your business. And also keep in mind that 20% of your customers are going to drive 80% of your engagement anyway. And, people that that leave reviews, positive reviews, are probably good candidates for getting involved in a community, however you want to do that. One of the biggest things that you see with these huge national and international businesses, and that small businesses can't do it anyways, they pay influencers to mention their product or their brand, and they're not really genuine advocates. They're getting paid. It's like when some celebrity recommends a product, it's like you're getting paid for that. Why would I trust you? And you might want to create some kind of value for people in your community, not just discounts and deals that you're going to offer to the public. We have a client, it's another marketing agency that I work with, and they have a client, and they do a couple of interesting things. They have a sod giveaway every spring, and current customers, they'll send them an email with a link to register for the sod giveaway. People that have contacted the business but did not buy anything, they send them a link to their Facebook page. And on there, they have a link where they can register for the sod giveaway. So they're kind of using that to build their Facebook page, which is kind of interesting. The other thing they do is they hold these workshops. And this is a landscape and pest control company. And they'll hold these workshops. They charge like $10 for it, and they limit it to 30 people. And it's not to make money. It's to cover the cost of the room that they're renting. And then it's a workshop on how to fight weeds, how to maintain your sprinkler system, how to do these different things. And then at the end, everyone that registered for it, they sent out an email survey asking for feedback. And anyone that's not a current customer, even if they are a current customer, they try to expand their services. And if they're not a current customer, they ask if they'd like an estimate on something, usually related to the workshop or any other service they offer. And I think those are some really interesting things. And I think there was Ian earlier that said it takes work and it takes effort, but it can really pay off in the long run. But I guess the biggest thing is don't try to buy it, and don't expect every satisfied customer to be active in your community. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I recognize personal preferences come into play. Communities are probably not packed full of introverts as much as they are extroverts, right? There's different people are going to engage in different ways, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
You could have like an introvert get together.
Well,
have fun games and everybody could introduce themselves. It would be wonderful.
So I'm a former engineer, so I can tell this joke. You know how to tell an introverted engineer from an extroverted engineer? The extroverted engineer looks at your shoes when he or she's talking to you. Okay. Paul,
tough crowd.
I had a couple of questions while you were talking. You talked about making the community, have value beyond just discounts and special deals. Can a community itself be the value?
For sure. I think what's interesting is we all met through a community, right? We all met because we were getting certified in a particular framework of marketing. And the one thing that always comes out of that community is that people come for the training, but they stay for the community, right? That's what that business has figured out, is that the community is the thing that creates stickiness. People want to stick around because of the community. So I think there's lots of examples of that, but that's, one that pops into my mind pretty quickly, especially when I'm looking at you guys.
Yeah, I think done right, the community itself can provide a ton of value. It's not just infrastructure for something else.
And the incredible thing about that idea is that, yes, it takes on a life of its own, and you need to moderate and control it to some level, or at least kind of almost think of it like a river, and you can't really control the river, so to speak, but you can modify its direction at times, right? So, but it is incredible because it frees your team up to become moderators rather than creators to some extent, which is much easier.
If you do it right and you build off advocates, you enlist other people to help in the community, the community can almost be something that you sponsor, right? You need to moderate it. Like you said, you need to retain a little bit of influence and control, but you don't need to dominate it. You don't, unless it gets out of control, then you got to rein it back in. But you don't need to be the dominant force. You can enlist community members to do that as well. Yeah, good.
I'm a part of a dental marketing community, and it's become so strong that you can become a sponsor of it now, and almost like you could be a sponsor of a podcast like this, right? And we are welcoming sponsorships. But but what's amazing about that is that the community trusts the group so much, and they know that sponsors are vetted for a very high quality. And so, just having the sponsorship gives you a whole bunch of credibility. And of course, it gives you access to this group that has incredible buying power.
Paul, I'm going to stick with you for the next question. I just kind of randomized how I want to ask questions, and you came up 2 in a row here. So stick with Paul. Paul, where should you actually build your community, and how do you avoid platform dependency while still leveraging social media? And don't necessarily limit your answer to social media, but of course, online is a possible place. So where do you build, and how do you avoid dependency on where you're building? I guess put it that way.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to avoid dependency if you're doing something online, but I guess it's more like someone had mentioned Circle. I don't have a lot of experience with that. I've used it a few times, but I would definitely avoid Facebook because they love to cancel people's accounts. They do it on a regular basis. I remember a while back when somebody we were working with, the CRM we all use it in the workflows. If there's someone in a certain stage of the workflow, it has that little icon of a person. If y'all know what I'm talking about in the workflow builder in the different stages. Well, anyway, someone asked him a question on Facebook, and he said you have to click on the little person in that stage, and that'll open it. And he got banned because he used the term little person.
Little person.
But yeah, any platform like that is whether you own it. And see, like even a private Facebook group, you still don't own it. And so if you're going to do something online, I don't think it's about avoiding these online or rented platforms as much as it's choosing which one you use. But using social media for recruitment as opposed to community housing. And see, that's something like Circle. I don't know that's necessarily social media.
On Facebook.
What's that?
You said the word housing.
What's that?
I said you would have just gotten banned on Facebook because you used the word housing.
Probably. But
now you got me worried about what the podcast algorithms are going to think of this episode.
They'll get over it. But you can recruit on social media, but I think using something like Circle, and there's others out there, to actually use that as a platform, I think that's a lot better. But you can use Instagram to drive members to whatever platform you're using, even if it is a private Facebook group. You can have people in your community post on LinkedIn, because there's a lot of back and forth on LinkedIn discussions. use YouTube tutorials, how-tos. I think I mentioned this last week or the week before that how-to videos are still the most searched for videos on YouTube. And you can even build a community around something like that. But again, I think one of the biggest mistakes is in trying to build a community is inconsistency. It does take time, it does take effort, and it does take consistency.
One of the platforms that comes to mind for me is, a platform I think we're all using for our clients. We've mentioned it before, but the CRM and marketing automation platform, Go High Level, because it's got a pretty robust community section
now,
built into it that's quite impressive and would give a lot of small businesses not only the ability to do a whole bunch of other marketing things, but they could also have their community housed on this platform that's interconnected with everything else they're doing.
Yeah, that interconnectedness is sure a plus for that platform for sure.
Yeah.
Another possibility, and it's a lot more in your control, it takes a little more effort, is you could build one on a website platform. WordPress has a number of great community, add-in packages that you can put in there. Most of the other, what I call big boy website systems, CMSs, are going to have some ability to build communities within their website too. So you could have somebody spin up your own community website or put it in your own website. You have options. The one thing I have noticed is the community platforms or the learning management systems, they often try and do double duty. I've seen people jump from platform to platform to platform, more so on those than others. So that's, when you build up a lot on a platform, it represents an investment in staying there. That's why, as Paul said, you don't want to be at the risk of somebody canceling you, but you want to make sure you get it right and do your homework too early on so that you don't spend a lot of effort building something else only to pull it off of there and pull it into a different community. I'm a little sensitive to that because I have a client who's doing exactly that now. He's coming out of a community that he kind of rushed into and moving into, he's using High Level for his CRM, our branded version of it, and he's rebuilding his community in there.
One of the really key things about what platform you choose your community on is, of course, we've talked about audience, but the other side of it is ease of use. If it's complicated and challenging, nobody's going to even want to be on that online community, regardless of the platform. So you have to, do some usability tests, try it out, have your mom or your, sister or dog try it out,
Yeah, my wife and I are constantly looking at each other going, don't the people that build these things actually use them?
Nope.
Yeah. And the answer in a lot of cases is no, they don't. Yeah, we talked about, being online, and not everything's online. I think offline has its place and can be very powerful and very important, but ultimately people are still going to want to stay in touch with you and with each other in the community outside of regular meetings or regular, events. So having some online component is going to be inevitable for pretty much every community in the modern era. Going back to Ken then. Ken, what types of content foster genuine community engagement rather than just passive consumption?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you guys may disagree with this, but I think taking a community strategy forward in your social media channels is the right way to do it, whether or not you're building an actual community platform like on Circle or Go High Level or Collab or any of the learning management systems like that. It's just going to improve the overall performance. So if you're concerned about being overwhelmed with, my gosh, now I have to build a community too, it doesn't have to be that hard. It's just a mind shift to think about how you're posting on channels where your ideal clients are naturally gathering. So I just wanted to kind of make that point. You can, and many businesses probably should look at being a lot more sophisticated around that, but you don't have to.
That is a really good point, Ken, because we started out by talking about the differences between communities and audiences, and the notion that you just want to engage people more and kind of build this sense of community. And we've kind of shifted into talking about more formal communities and platforms to run them. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
There's a spectrum that you can operate on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I would do when I would be looking at what types of content I need to create is I would probably look at what pain points do the people that are likely to join my community have, and build talking points and seed questions and prompts, maybe even do polls to kind of facilitate conversations around, hey, roofers, how do you solve your missed call or slow follow-up response problem? Share your ideas with our community. I mean, maybe that's a way you get started, but you identify common pain points that you know are going to resonate with people, where it's going to be much more likely for somebody to jump in and start having, posting content about how I do this. And then somebody's like, oh, but I can't do that because I don't have all of this. And then before you know it, you've got a conversation going amongst maybe not just those two people, but maybe several people that are within your community, however community might be defined. So I think doing that, I love the idea of user-generated content. That's kind of like the gold in marketing. If you can get to the point where you've got customers who are advocates to the point where they love to share and look, they can do it out of vanity reasons. I do it all the time. When I go at a restaurant, I love to post pictures of great looking, great tasting food, in part because, yeah, I'll be honest, I want to make my friends jealous. But you know what? I do not mind giving the shout out to the business because they put together a heck of a dish that I'm enjoying. So
I'm always jealous, Ken.
I know you are.
Yeah.
That's why I do it. You're my sole motivation.
Yeah.
So, I love behind the scenes content as well. It's a little harder for some businesses to do. I think video is a really great way to do it. But again, when you look at the overall shift in the way that the online world is working, driven by AI, whether it's within Google search or whether it's within the LLM, or Chat GPT type platforms, community is playing a big role because it's helping to send valuable signals about your business. And so if you can demonstrate that you are part of a community builder, look, we call it the web for a reason, right? I mean, the web, it's interconnectedness. And the more interconnected you are, the better, especially if you're demonstrating authority and trustworthiness and expertise, the more likely it is to have findability benefits. And if you can get other people talking about you or participating in the content that you're helping to facilitate, that's just sending strong signals. I actually, the other thing I like about not doing a private Facebook group, but using a social media strategy, in part is because it does give potential visibility to other people who may be very interested in joining your group, but would never have any idea that it even existed without that. So, there are definitely reasons to have public versus private groups, or even leveraging your business assets like your Facebook business page or your LinkedIn company page. But I think the key thing is, just creating content that is going to shift the focus from, hey, we do this, hey, buy this, hey, sign up for this, to have a problem. Here's how one customer we know solved this problem. That's going to be much more likely to generate a conversation and say, oh, really? Tell me more. Or how can I replicate that? Or they may even reach out to that business and say, wow, I'd love to have a conversation with you. And you know what? That if they have that conversation, the company that provided that solution is going to thank you because you gave them kind of a credibility and authority points. And so I think there's a lot of benefit there. You can also set it up to where you can do live questions and answers. I mean, there's just so many different ways that you could do it. But I think the key thing is don't think about community like you probably have always thought about posting on social media. You need to do that mind shift. You need to change your strategy on what you're doing on social. Right now, human is more important than it's ever been because of AI. And when you come across as human and authentic, even if AI helped you to generate and create that concept or that content largely, make sure you make it human and post it, and don't make it about you, make it about the community. Whether your community is your customers, your prospects, the global community or the local community that you're a part of. If you're helping people just build awareness around hunger or environmental concerns or gun safety or whatever it might be, add value in advance. That's always critical. Don't make it about you. Make it about everybody else.
Ken, do you think there's a place for multiple communities with a business or multiple levels within a community?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think. I mean, we see it all the time. People have a Facebook page. They may be using that in a community kind of a strategy. They may not be. But then some people are going to have private communities where maybe it's within a private Facebook group. Maybe it's with an off Facebook platform style. Could be on the website or Circle or, wherever we've talked about. You can have, private events, invitation only for your top spending customers, for example. I think you want to give that some thought and plan, and also realize what the repercussions might be from exclusion. What are the benefits of inclusion? Is that an aspirational thing where you want people to say, "Oh wow, yeah, I'm at that level," but with balancing the frustration of feeling like somebody else may be excluded. A simple example of this is how many times have we all been loyal members of a software development platform, and they come out with a promotion that you see, probably through an advertising channel or an email that they send saying, "Hey, sign up and you'll get X% off, your first 4 months." And it's like, well, hey, what about me? I've been a loyal customer forever. That always pisses me off. It's disrespectful that they do that. Does that mean that I cancel my subscription? Probably not, but it put a bad taste in my mouth, and I might start looking for a different solution. You just don't want to give people a reason through your community outreach, which could be, by email or advertising, to create an exclusion opportunity that you didn't think through, because that happens all the time.
Plant seeds of disloyalty, right?
Right.
One of the comments I wanted to just share was you were talking about the difference between private and public groups within Facebook. One of the very best strategies I've seen that works is where you actually have a public group, but you can't comment on anything in that public group until the moderator allows you to join. So you have to go through a join process. Probably most listeners have done this, but it can have some fielding questions or criteria where you have to answer them, and then they're like, "Yep, you're in," or "Yep, you're out," or "No, you're out." But that's a great way, because all of the posts in your public group that is semi-private, they show up in searches. So if people are searching for a particular solution, chances are very high that posts within your group are going to show up in that, because you have so much content that's user generated.
So Ian, let's come back to you for a question. What metrics indicate healthy community growth versus vanity metrics that don't drive business results?
Yeah, the big thing here is getting away from vanity metrics, right? Vanity metrics are not bad in and of themselves. They are directional, right? So I always hate when people just write off vanity metrics, because they have their place. They're kind of, if you imagine, a group of metrics as being a funnel for people coming into your circle of influence, and then they get further and further down it, at the very top of the funnel, you have, maybe it's views or reach. And then as it starts to go down, you get to things like engagement, right? Commenting, engagement, all of that kind of stuff. And so when we're talking about community, it really is all about engagement. It's about, how involved are people in your community. And that's ultimately what you're looking for, because the people who are more involved are your champions. They're the ones that are going to be referral partners. And so the payoff comes from the involved people. So things like engagement rate, as far as a metric, conversion quality, these kind of things are much bigger than, follower counts and that kind of stuff. But again, follower count is kind of top of the funnel, and these are where more bottom of the funnel. Then things like, if you know your customer lifetime value, if even community involvement, like how long people have been in there, super important. I would just say, engagement and involvement are kind of the gold standard, and anywhere that you can tie the community to referrals and sales, like to me, that's the biggest metric, right? You've gotten them through your marketing hourglass to a certain level where it's actually starting to generate business for you. And that's, truthfully, that is what this is all about, right? That's why you're going to invest in community creation, because ultimately it has a positive bottom line impact on your business.
All right. I'm going to jump to the next question. I know we've been about 45 minutes in now. Let's switch gears a little bit, talk about, executing, building communities and some of the pitfalls to avoid. So, Paul, what are the most common ways small businesses accidentally sabotage their own community building efforts?
I think one of the biggest things, they treat it like just another marketing channel.
How so?
What's that?
How so?
Well, there's a lot of communities where the business owner isn't really involved. They kind of get this community going and they don't actively participate. And that's, if you're gonna build a community, you have to participate in that community. That's just kind of how it goes. Or at least someone from your business needs to. And it's usually better if it's the owner. But you can't over moderate. You have to be careful there. But it does require some community management. And again, I think one of the biggest things, it goes back to consistency. And you have to track engagement as opposed to how many people join. Because a lot of people, they join these communities, but then they never do anything. And it's like, okay, why are people joining and not actually engaging? If there is an engagement, then what's the point of having a community? And something else you see in communities that I think is wrong is where they remove comments like constructive criticism or things that say, hey, maybe you could improve here, improve there. I had this issue with your product or your service. You want to simply address that so that people, kind of like a bad review, you want to address it so people know that you actually do care. And again, like I said, treating it as a sales channel, constantly promoting your business or your product or your service. I'm not saying it doesn't have any place. I'm saying that's not the purpose of a community.
Yeah, that takes it back to being an audience if you do that, right?
But does
anyone else have anything? Should we go to the next question? All right, let's come back to Ian then.
Yeah, I will.
Go ahead, Ken.
Say this. Paul, engagement obviously is important. But I'll tell you, I find massive value out of participating in communities just by reading the conversations or learning about what other people are doing. I don't participate or add to those conversations very often, but it's still an important information channel that's not just coming directly from the company. It's coming from other people who are using a similar product or trying to solve a similar, issue. And I find tremendous value in that. So obviously the community has to have content, and it has, and the communities that I think about, fortunately, they have big enough audiences where there's always conversation going on. I don't have to participate. I don't have to create a lot of content, but I can still get massive amounts of value out of it. It's kind of a tricky thing. I don't know what you do about that, but you certainly need to always make sure that somebody is there actively stimulating conversation.
Well, and you're kind of talking about the halo effect, right, Ken? Like you're in the orbit, you're not kind of at the center of it, but that still has a very positive effect on you in relation to the group. Right. But then, as people get pulled closer and closer into the orbit, they're the ones that get more and more involved. So yeah. Like what you're talking about is it has less immediate impact on the organization that's running the community, right? Because you're probably not going to do anything different. So it's not going to create great action, but you're still in the orbit. You're still consuming information. You're still feeling good about that community.
It's keeping me engaged as a customer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's building loyalty, to the product and the brand.
Yeah.
So Ian, if you could, fairly quickly, because we're getting toward the end here.
Sure.
What's a realistic roadmap for small businesses to begin building communities without overwhelming their current operations?
Yeah. Don't go into it thinking you're going to build the biggest community in the world right away. Start small. Start with the people closest to you and to your business, your biggest fans, your referral partners. Start there. Start by deepening the relationships you already have. Community grows best when it begins with trust, not traffic. You need to, look at it as a long-term approach that you're planting the seed of the acorn, and the tree is going to grow huge, perhaps, but you need to nurture it over time. So again, step one, create a strategic plan first. Don't skip that step. Identify existing advocates, create simple connection opportunities, establish regular community touch points, and stimulate engagement. Introduce community members to each other, right? That's when you start to get the peer-to-peer connections, and then just keep feeding into it. And the more you nurture this thing and the more people that come into the orbit of it, you're going to start to win from that. But it is a long play. Like this usually isn't like an overnight, turnkey solution for getting leads for your business. It's more about strengthening existing ones and then drawing more people in.
That old saying about eating the elephant one bite at a time. Just think about what you want to do and then just methodically do it, and don't try and go huge all at once.
Yep.
Ken, so inevitably there's going to be some challenges, negative feedback, difficult members, community conversations that go a different direction than you wish they would. How do you deal with those without killing the authentic engagement that you're trying to build?
The first thing is to make sure you establish community guidelines and make it a process, maybe even an onboarding process to go through those community guidelines. You want, honestly, healthy disagreement can be some of the best engagement that you could get within your community, but it needs to be done respectfully. And, it needs, constructive as opposed to divisive behaviors. Making sure there's moderation going on so that things don't spiral out of control. You do need to be prepared for this. If there is, somebody who crosses the line, you need to have a plan on how you're going to deal with that. Are you going to just kick them out of the group, or are you going to pull them aside privately and have a conversation and say, hey, look, or do you put a temporary ban on their ability to engage and interact? You have to think about the pros and cons of all of that, but you have to give it some forethought. Just keep in mind, criticism can be beneficial when done right. And typically the things that generate the most conversation are when people have different points of view and different considerations. Just make sure that it doesn't cross that line, and you have to clearly establish what that line is. And I think you have to have a plan of onboarding your new members to help them understand where those lines are and what the consequences are if they cross those lines.
I was just going to say, one of the interesting things I see in these public gated groups is that the really good ones always invite new members to introduce themselves. even if you have hundreds of new members, it just creates all of this flurry of activity and people feel like they're engaged right away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the couple things as you're talking about that is, inevitably there's going to be some conflicts, and how you handle it makes a huge difference. Says a lot about, you and your business and your business's approach to community and how much they value it, and or whether it's just a passing, oh, check that box. It's also a good opportunity to learn. I think you mentioned that. And then, when thinking about moderating style or, how you handle situations, step back and apply AITA. And if you don't recognize the AITA acronym, look it up online. You'll find it pretty quickly. It's the bottom line is really ask yourself, who is or where is the real problem here? And am I trying to be too controlling? Is the community off topic? Is it off base? Is it not serving what it's supposed to serve well? Any other thoughts on this question, or actually we'll move to wrap up? Any other thoughts in general that anyone wants to hit on?
No, I think this was a great topic, Jeff. I think it's really important, especially for companies that are maturing, like they've got a good customer base and they want to now create greater stickiness and really make it very hard for the competition to get their grubby little paws on your existing clients.
Yeah. I just think it helps with retention. It helps, I think, increase visibility, or the likelihood of visibility. It builds credibility and trust, authority. When you do these right.
And I think just something Ian mentioned earlier is that this is a long-term thing. It's not, I'm going to set up this community and I'm done, and it'll take care of itself, because it won't.
Yeah, you're tapping right into my closing thoughts. Think of the big picture. It's about building genuine community, genuine engagement, deep relationships with key members of your audience, and then broadening out from there. It takes longer. I said your audience of your community. It takes longer than just building an audience. But the customers you gain from it, those deeper relationships, and how you engage with them can be gold. They'll have stronger community advocacy. They'll stay longer. They'll spend more. They'll bring their friends. That's what you want. So in a world where everyone's fighting for attention, the businesses that create real connection between people will be the ones that win. So your homework, if you are haven't even been thinking about starting a community, maybe consider it, see how it would play into your business. And if you've been thinking about it, then start simple, work your way into it. Identify 3 customers that genuinely love working with you, and personally invite them for a coffee, talk about it, kick the ideas around, build outward from there. Build your community around a few key advocates. So, Ian, as is our custom, would you like to take us out, please?
Sure thing. Thank you for joining us today. This was an inspiring conversation, I found. So thank you, Jeff, for putting this together. For all of you out there that haven't hit the subscribe button yet, punch it. Punch that subscribe button, leave us a rating or review, share this with your friends, family, and favorite rodents, whatever you want to share it with. And until next week, folks, keep calm and mark it on.